Hello, everybody. Welcome to our inaugural career panel. My name is Marcus Thiel. I'm the Jean Monnet Center Director at Florida International University and a European Politics and International Organizations professor in the Department of Politics and International Relations at the School of International Public Affairs at Florida International University. And I very welcome every one of you, including our panelists, including the over 100 students and alumni from across the United States. As part of the European Union grant called Getting to Know Europe, and you can see here my fancy background with the Berlaymont building in which the European Commission is, you have our grant title, Meet the European Union, which FIU received together with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as well as Pittsburgh. So that's why we have also this little marker here. And as part of this European Union grant called Getting to Know Europe, we will be holding regular career panels, basically 2 per semester for now virtual, with alumni, European CEOs and business chamber representatives, other nonprofit leaders, as well as European diplomats, focusing on the various career parts in Europe, but also in the US that relate to Europe, the skills needed for that, the study opportunities, and so on and so on. But before we really dig into the panel and let the panelists talk, just a little bit of housekeeping. We asked each panelist to detail a bit about their position, what skills are needed, and what students should do to prepare for position in their respective areas. After these presentations, there will be at least about 30 minutes of question and answers. So we welcome your questions posed through the chat box. Please do so. I think by now everybody should be familiar with how Zoom and the chat box in Zoom works. That's the one on the bottom. But before we really begin, I want to thank the European Commission and the EU Delegation in Washington D.C. for funding our outreach and public diplomacy activities, as well as our collaborative partners, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and the University of Pittsburgh, as well as our US Jean Monnet network for their good collaboration. And of course, my right hand, Miss Christine Cali Sanchez, as well as our school SIPA staff and the career services staff that were instrumental in making this happen. A special thanks goes to our guest panelists that are present today, and I will introduce them shortly. But before we do so, we have the pleasure to have here with us Mr. Michael Curtis, the Deputy Head of the EU Delegation, who will give a few introductory remarks, given that this is our first inaugural Getting to Know Europe panel. A few words about Mr. Curtis himself. Mr. Curtis joined the delegation, having served in the team of the EU's foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, advising her on a number of important foreign policy issues for the past 5 years, including on transatlantic relations. He has had a long career in EU institutions, working mainly on foreign policy and external relations, trade, development, and humanitarian issues. From 2004 to 2008, he worked as the EU Humanitarian Affairs Counselor to the United Nations in New York. From 2000 to 2004, he worked on the team of the EU Commissioner for Development and Humanitarian Aid, Paul Nielsen, first as spokesperson, then as a member of the staff. Mr. Curtis has a bachelor degree in French and politics from Leicester University in the UK, and a postgraduate master's degree in European politics from the eminent College of Europe in Bruges, Belgium. Mr. Curtis, thank you so much for being here. I know you're a very busy person as the deputy head of the EU delegation, so we really appreciate you being here. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Marcus. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the kind introduction and for moderating this event. And a big thanks to you at the Florida International University, Miami, and the Jean Monnet Center for hosting us. I mean, it really is a genuine pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to students who have gone through and are going through the Jean Monnet Centers, whether at FIU, the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and the University of Pittsburgh, or the Jean Monnet Center USA network writ large. I think it's a testament to the success and the effectiveness of the initiative that we now support 10 centers of excellence at universities all across the US. When the European Commission embarked on this mission in 1998, the aim was to create EU centers in universities across the US to spur knowledge and understanding about the European Union. And I think 23 years on, bonds and bridges have been built across the Atlantic under this program that have no doubt created communities of EU knowledge and reservoirs of goodwill that we can draw on today as we grapple with common challenges and policy choices that will define us for years to come. Study of the European integration in the US might have been considered a bit of a niche specialization, especially in the early days. It was also the case in Europe in the late 80s when I wanted to do EU affairs. It was a bit of a minority sport. But thanks to all of you involved for persevering and for your investment. Hopefully you feel gratified and vindicated that the EU is being recognized as a relevant and valued partner for the United States. And as a new administration comes into office, we have the opportunity to work together to ensure recovery from the COVID pandemic, tackle climate change, ensure that our trade is free and fair, and to rebuild the foundations of democracy itself. So your study of EU integration and your desire to understand has helped to keep the flame alive. I know you want me to speak about employment opportunities in EU diplomacy that can help strengthen and sorry, that's the problem of working in the office. I just got rid of my phone. Sorry about that. If you want to, I know you want me to speak a bit about employment opportunities in EU diplomacy that can help strengthen and solidify these links and connections between the EU and the US. And perhaps it's useful to share how I came to be an EU official. When I joined the EU Commission in the 1990s, the pace of European integration was really accelerating. It was an exciting time. The concept of a single currency had been launched, the Iron Curtain had just come down, and the countries of Central and Eastern Europe were expressing the wish for EU membership. And it was also the early days where we were talking about common foreign and security policy. So, you know, as a young man at the time, this is something which I was interested in. You know, Brussels was also the place to be. It was exciting, dynamic, cosmopolitan. In 1992, as you mentioned, Marcus, I just completed a master's degree in European Studies at the College of Europe, and then I went on to do a 5-month internship at the European Commission. I knew I wanted to become an EU official, but it's an arduous process. It's a bit of an obstacle course, to be honest. In a nutshell, you have these open recruitment competitions are held every so often for nationals of all member states. These can be either specialized, you know, for translators, lawyers, economists, or they can be a bit more general. So thousands of people sit these initial round of exams all over the European Union, but not everyone makes it through. So I did, and I still feel incredibly lucky to have succeeded in that. And then I went on to have the opportunity to serve the European Union as a spokesperson, as you mentioned, spent 4 years at our delegation in New York, and before coming here to Washington D.C. as Deputy Ambassador, I worked for Federica Mogherini for 5 years. I mean, there are now other ways to serve in the EU if you're a member state citizen. Since the Lisbon Treaty created the European External Action Service in 2010, and this year we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. It's also now possible for national diplomats like Maria Belovas to do a tour of duty in the EU institutions and serve in external delegations. And I also recall working with Laurent Garissot, who at one point was seconded to the European Commission from the French Foreign Ministry. EU delegations, like this one here in DC, also have the possibility to recruit locally for certain skill sets and positions. For example, here we have in the delegation, almost 2/3 of our staff are locally recruited. They're dealing with Congress, US policy, economics, energy, outreach and media, you know, all locally recruited who are working under diplomatic supervision. For US citizens, the opportunities are certainly not going to be as available as they would be for citizens of the member states, but there are possibilities and positions are available. To begin with, there are traineeships. There are traineeship opportunities in the EU delegation to the US, which Maria Belovas will delve into more detail in the panel discussion. But briefly, I would say that the program is designed to give students and young graduates some real experience of the daily work in a diplomatic mission, while also learning about the representation of EU interests. If you're thinking of a career in the US Foreign Service, I think it's also a great way to start developing the right reflexes, instincts, and contacts that could well serve you in the future. For the local recruitment opportunities I mentioned, these are open to US citizens and green card holders possessing the right qualifications. The recruitment process is completely open and straightforward, starting with vacancy notices on our social media platforms and career websites. There's an application process, interviews, and then finally the selection of the successful candidate. In fact, only this week I've been interviewing candidates for one position here in the delegation, and both of the final two candidates are American. So we have, as I said, local agents in a variety of positions right across the delegation, from the ambassador's office to the trade and agriculture sections, press and public diplomacy, political, economic and financial, etc. So it's really, really the pillar of what we do. So there are also opportunities and traineeships in the delegation of the EU to the United Nations in New York, which I'm sure you'll hear about more during this event. So while I'm certainly biased towards employment in the realm of European diplomacy, it's an excellent opportunity to work on issues that have a beneficial impact on both the local and international scale. I mean, there are no shortages of quotes regarding the importance of public service. And I think it's a commendable career path, especially in the US and in Europe as well. I have to agree that I think human service and working towards the common good is one of the best ways to commit yourself to the betterment of your society, whether that society is in the European member state or in the US. But it's certainly an exciting time to do so in transatlantic relations. We all know that our societies have our hands full at the moment with an array of issues and challenges that need a combined effort to solve. I mentioned COVID, collaboration on climate change, and green transitions, working together on technology, trade and standards, and strengthening democracy. I think these are precarious times we see in Europe and in the US, and the stakes are high. But it's also an exciting time to make a difference for the EU, the US, and the broader international order. So I'll leave it there. I hope I haven't been too long, Marcus. I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your studies and future employment. I hope for your success, and some of you will be joining or supporting our EU diplomatic efforts on the world stage. I'll stay on this throughout, and also happy to take part in the question and answer session at the end. But now I hand it back to you, Marcus. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the European Union delegation to have such a close relationship with us. And we hope that you can be here for a while. We already start receiving the first questions, which will be then, of course, answered after the presentations of our panelists. So thanks again. We have a wonderful lineup of panelists. And if you took a look at the program, you probably saw we have everything from a number of potential career paths that will hopefully be now detailed in the various EU institutions in Europe, as well as on the US side or maybe elsewhere. We also have the national diplomatic level represented with the Consul General Calizot in Miami. And then, of course, we have also State Department opportunities, hopefully in Europe or elsewhere, represented by our wonderful diplomat in residence at FIU, Ms. Rebecca Kimbrell. Okay, but let's start. First, I'll have, please, Ms. Maria Belovas speak a little bit about Maria Belovas herself. She's the spokesperson and the head of press and public diplomacy at the delegation of the European Union in Washington since August 2018. Her team covers the entire spectrum of press, strategic communications, maybe you can say something about that as well, cultural diplomacy, people-to-people exchanges, and education in close coordination with the EU member states and local partners. Before joining the European Union, the European Union's External Action Service that was mentioned earlier by Mr. Curtis, she spent 10 years in the diplomatic service of the Republic of Estonia, most recently as the Director General for Communications. Her department was responsible for media relations, public diplomacy, strategic communications, and nation branding. She has also served in the Estonian embassies in Portugal and the United States. Ms. Belovas has a degree in journalism and public relations from the University of Tartu. With that being said, Ms. Belovas, thank you. The floor is yours for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you, Marcus. I hope you hear me all right. It's a little bit strange. I see the number of attendees, but I don't see any attendees. So I hope you're actually there and not just muted everything and cooking a breakfast or early lunch in your kitchen. But it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. And Marcus already basically read my bio. But since this is a career themed webinar, I just wanted to add a little bit of how I got into diplomacy and why am I here today, and how, as Michael mentioned, and I hope you understood, and Michael and I, we work for the same EEAS, or the European External Action Service, here in Washington, D.C. for the EU delegation. Michael is my boss. Michael is our deputy head of delegation, and I'm head of one of those sections we have here, sections or divisions or whatever you want to call them. We call them sections. And Press and Public Diplomacy is PPD in short. And as Marcus mentioned, we cover a lot of different areas, but basically you can call it outreach, you can call it communications, but communications in the area of diplomacy is a lot to do with public diplomacy. So reaching out to different audiences in the United States. So our audiences are here in America, and this is our main focus, to explain our policies, to change people's hearts and minds in the long run, but really just to let people in the United States know that we're here, what we are, what we're doing, and why we have actually so much in common. But as mentioned, I am actually an Estonian diplomat, so I am not an EU official as Michael is. I am what the system calls a temporary agent. Not sure why the term agent is here, but yes, I am a temporary agent for the European Union. That means that I applied for this post, and every year a certain amount of EU posts will be opened up to member state diplomats. So everyone from every member state's foreign service can apply. And so I did that in the end of 2017 for this post here in Washington. The process took about maybe 7-8 months from the application, sending in my resume, my cover letter, to getting invited to the interview, and then receiving the offer. But it was of course a really exciting process, and I'm very happy to be here. But going back to the very beginning, after my studies, or actually even when I was studying for my journalism and public relations degree, I really had no idea of, why public sector would be interesting to me. It wasn't really in my studies anything on a practical terms. It was really focused on going into marketing or journalism or business. But then I managed to get a traineeship during my university studies in the Prime Minister's office in Estonia. Again, there was an application process. I don't know if it wasn't popular enough or if I was a very strong candidate, but I managed to be one of those, the two, for a summer. And that really opened this public government sphere up for me. There was so much more exciting that I could have ever thought of, that so many different areas that you have to deal with there. And the way that you really have to measure the impact or try to evaluate how what you're doing it well, is so much different than it is in the private sector. So this is where it started from me. So my first job was actually in the Ministry of Economic Affairs in Estonia. I was part of their media team there. And from there, I was invited actually, or recommended by my mentor in the Prime Minister's office, to join the Foreign Ministry. And I was the first person in Estonian public service who had the title of a new media expert. Back then, social media was called new media. I'm very happy that they're not doing that anymore. So I had a lot of fun creating the social media, the digital presence for the Estonian Foreign Ministry, and then also helping out creating the social media presence for the Estonian government, coming up with the first social media regulations for government employees. And from there on, I had the chance to take the diplomatic exam in the Estonian Foreign Service. That meant basically a test on general knowledge, history, foreign policy, geography, anything you can think of that you should know when you're networking with people or sort of generally conversing. So it was a lot of studying different things, making sure that I'm aware of all current affairs, but also anything from Estonian, European history and global affairs. So that was a tough exercise, but I passed. And I also, in parallel, I took the consular course, because I think different from the American system, where you have sort of cones. So you're either in a consular cone or a political cone or another. In Estonian foreign service, every diplomat who goes outside needs to have passed the consular exam and passed the consular course, which means that I can issue death certificate, I can issue visas, I can take passport applications, and that's something that I did at my first posting in Lisbon, Portugal, where I was a part of a micro team of 2 diplomat embassy, which basically made me deputy chief of mission in my first posting. But that also meant that I was wearing all the hats you can wear at the same time. So I was a cultural, a press, a trade, economic, political diplomat at the same time. So it was quite a challenge, but it was a lot of fun. And from there, I moved to Washington to deal with press and culture, back to Tallinn to become the Director General of Communications. And after that, I moved here. But if you ask me sort of how or why, I mean, it's actually all of this happened in about 10, 11 years. I think I can say that I've always been trying to look at the bigger picture and speak out more than maybe my role would require, but I wouldn't just whine, but really if I offer opinions, I also offer solutions. So I think this is maybe a way that I stood out. And also the same thing during all of my job interviews. I've always tried to prepare very well and make sure that that I'm very clear of what I can bring to the table to the organization or that post that I'm applying for. Not just saying that I'm a great person and you should really like me, but really making people aware that this is important to me. I'm ready for this, but this is beneficial to both ways. And but now going maybe from myself to these offerings we have here at the delegation. So one thing is, as Michael already mentioned, yes, we have traineeships and we have local agent posts. But first, I would say, why would you be interested in becoming a member of, you know, a diplomatic mission, even if it's a non-diplomatic post? So there, in business psychology, there's this job characteristics model that that really predicts how that there are some characteristics to a job that can predict high performance, high motivation, and satisfaction with the job. And that's skill variety, task identity, task significance, which means that there is a lot of meaningfulness in the job. And then there's also autonomy, which means that there is a lot of ways that you can independently tailor the way that you perform your task, which really increases your responsibility, but it also increases your job satisfaction. And then there is feedback, which means that you hear about the results, or you actually know what you do means. So, and I would say that in my career, in those different posts that I've held and the posts that we can offer here at the delegation, all of these characteristics are there. Excuse me. And I would say that working here at the delegation can be very sort of high motivating, with high performance and high satisfaction. And there's never one day like another, and one task like another. And I think that goes for a lot of different places and posts in diplomacy. Sorry, I have to take a sip. All right, so first, traineeships. We offer traineeships basically twice a year. Normally before the pandemic, we took about 13 trainees at a time. And these were funded traineeships, and we used to offer more unfunded traineeships, but now we offer only one per 6 months. So for the funded traineeships, these are for young graduates with less than 1 year professional experience. And for the unfunded traineeships, these are for graduate students who are participating in this traineeship for their academic benefit. So for the funded traineeships, we opened these up for European and American students. And now, of course, during the pandemic, we can't invite anyone over from Europe. So the applicants have been from the US. What we require from your diploma for the funded traineeships is that you must have graduated from the university or equivalent higher education establishment with at least a bachelor's degree. And for unfunded traineeships, applicants shall be 3rd, 4th, or 5th year students of a university or other higher education establishment. And the procedure is, as I said, 2 times per year. We will post a call for trainees on our website and on our social media sites. And the next time will be in June to start in about September. So it takes about 2.5 months from the application to the start. And so the traineeships, you can basically, what you can do is we have 1 or 2 trainees in every section. So if you're more interested in trade issues or agriculture, or more in foreign policy, or maybe climate or energy, when you apply, you can let us know which section you would like to apply for. And we will make sure to try to accommodate that. And of course, press and public diplomacy section is one of those horizontal ones where you can actually work with other sections and also work with us here on communication and outreach events. So we'll make sure that all the traineeships are really relevant and beneficial for the students. So it's not just reporting and definitely not making coffee for your colleagues, but it's actually good hard work. And we have, I would say, a very good sort of alumni network from our trainees. The feedback has been very good so far. I mean, I've been here for 2.5 years now, but I've also met some of the trainees from previous times who still keep in touch with our colleagues. And everyone, I think, has been very happy here so far. And so I really urge everyone to apply for the next round in June. And just to go very shortly over the local agent positions that Michael also mentioned, we have about 57 local agent positions right now. And these are in different categories, obviously, but I can tell you from the press and public diplomacy section, where I have 18 posts altogether, 16 of those are local agents. So everything that we do in communications basically is done with the help of local agents. So not diplomats sent from Europe. And you can have local agents in groups from policy advisors to administratives to assistants to drivers. So we have a lot of different local agent groups. We have very good, I would say, competitive salary packages and vacation and health and social benefits. And of course, the application process is very simple. It's cover letter and resume to start from. And then the next round would be an interview, and then for the final top candidates, an interview with either the ambassador or the deputy chief of mission. And all the vacancies that we have will be published in the Indeed.com platform and also promoted on our social media channels. And now I've taken up a lot of your time already, so I'll stop here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's a whole lot of information, and I think there are already questions coming in specifically about some of what you have said. But again, please send your questions to the chat, the Q&A box. We will address them basically in the order they arrive after the presentations. So next we have Mr. Joseph Dunn. He's also based out of Washington, D.C. Mr. Dunn has been appointed director of the European Parliament's Liaison Office to the US in Washington, D.C., which was set up to foster and develop relations between the European Parliament and the United States Congress. In 2018, Mr. Dunn was a senior resident fellow at the German Marshall Fund, who's also located in Washington, and a visiting fellow at the Scar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Up to that time, he was director in the Directorate General for the European Parliament's Research Service, which is it's just like the Congressional Research Service, a wonderful resource for everyone doing research on the European Union, including me. He was previously head of Secretariat for the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee and Deputy Chef de Cabinet for the European Parliament President Pat Cox. Before his parliamentary activities, Mr. Dunn served in the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs. He edited the first edition of Mapping the Cost of Non-Europe in April 2014. He has an MA in EU law from King's College of London. Mr. Dunn, thank you for being here, and the next few minutes are yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Marcus. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everybody. And it's interesting to listen to Maria and Michael. I'm on the speaker here. I'm in a little bit of an atypical or unusual situation because I am an EU official, and by chance I'm also a national diplomat or national civil servant. But normally I'm working for a different institution. Normally the European Parliament does not have offices abroad. The European Parliament has information offices, and the treaty doesn't allow the European Parliament to have this external projection because that's the role of the European External Action Service. But because of the special situation in Washington and the special position, if you like, of the US Congress, Parliament 10 years ago established a small office here, and we're here thanks to the good graces of the European External Action Service, but we're institutionally and administratively separate from the External Action Service. The reason is, of course, that the European Parliament is a separate institution. I mean, Europe is nothing if not complicated. So, but in a sense, you know, as students of European integration, you know very well that the European Union is not a fully formed union, but in many respects, it is a full union. And the legislation that's co-legislated by the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers accounts for up to 70% of the total legislation which affects EU citizens. So we certainly feel we're the other part of the picture, where the Parliament tends to look on the US Congress as what it's going to be when it grows up. And in a sense, I feel very privileged to be here in this role, where my job is to deepen and increase the already very intense parliamentary context between the European Parliament and the US Congress. So in a sense, I'm speaking here for parliamentary diplomacy. And I'm thankful to the European Parliament because I've had a very, very varied career, which I'd like to tell you a little bit about. But I suppose where I should start by saying that, to pick up from Maria said, before I start talking about myself and how I got here, how I landed in Washington, by mentioning that the European Parliament office does have a small internship program, which is different from the program that Maria mentioned, but the interns in the EU delegation and the interns that we have a lot of contact and get on very well together. Our program allows us to take a small number of 4 interns per year. We have had intake from FIU, if I'm not mistaken, certainly in the recent past. And this internship is relatively well paid. It's to be eligible, you need to be an American citizen or to be permanent resident in the United States. It offers 3 months in the office, so working on issues between the European Parliament and the US Congress, and 2 months in Brussels, where you can be embedded more or less in the service of your choice. At least in the past, we have been very successful in managing to situate and to get our interns to land in the committee secretariats or the services which were of most interest to them. Maria and Michael talked about how they came into diplomacy. I recently found out from a relative of mine that when I was asked at 11 years what I was going to be when I grew up, I said I was going to be an ambassador. So I certainly don't remember that, but I have always been very motivated to live and work in a multinational environment. I'm quite good at languages. The Dutch have an expression. Some people have a button for languages. Certainly, it's a very important, and it's essential to have at least a minimum of foreign languages when you are an EU civil servant. It's a minimum of 3 languages, so 2 additional to your mother tongue. And you know, I always enjoyed from the youngest age. I always enjoyed meeting people from other countries, and always had this tremendous wish to go outside of Ireland. I think I always had an empathy or a wish to do public service, and politics and parliamentarianism at its best is about making lives better for people. And I was always interested in the creation of Europe, and I think in working in the job I'm working in, I feel that over the years I've worked in the European Parliament, I've contributed a few bricks, let's say, to the creation of the Union. It's something dynamic, it's exciting, and it evolves quite quickly. And I can recall when I started in the European Parliament, since you're all scholars of European integration, I can talk about the Single European Act and not need to explain it, but I arrived at a time when Parliament was just coming to grips with the early stages of being a serious contributor to legislation and having a role beyond an opinion-giving role. And I stayed with the Parliament to the point where almost no legislation, except in certain reserved areas, almost no legislation goes through without an equal say from the Parliament. So, and another aspect of working in the Parliament is, of course, that you work very closely with parliamentarians, and that's, I can say, it's certainly always stimulating. Whoever the parliamentarian is, I mean, nobody is elected without talent. You know, in some respects, the parliamentarians reflect the spectrum of society. So you find of course, you inevitably find all kinds of people in all walks of life represented, but it's always exciting and stimulating. The other aspect of working in Parliament that Maria mentioned in terms of autonomy, because it's a smaller structure than the European Commission or the External Action or the European Commission, and because it's less hierarchically rigid, it's more political and therefore more fluid. So officials like myself have great considerable freedom of action and autonomy to initiate things, and to especially if you're the parliamentarians you're working with or that you're responsible for assisting, if they want to achieve something, you can make a big contribution. And I think I feel I've done that over the years. Marcus, I've lost my clock now, so I don't want to go way over time, but Marcus mentioned some of the points of my career. I think it might be worthwhile perhaps explaining that a bit more. I went from, when I started in the European Parliament, I started as an administrator in a parliamentary committee. That's the equivalent of professional staff in a congressional committee. It doesn't work quite the same way, because Europe believes in civil servants in a way that the United States does not, and relies on them. I mean, of course, you have persons very much in the news, like the Senate parliamentarian, and you have agencies of public servants like the FBI, but the Congress as such only has a very small cadre of permanent officials, whereas the structure in the European Parliament is that more than half, well, 2/3 of the staff are civil servants recruited according to an open competition. A peculiar feature of or two peculiar features of the Parliament, of course, is that it works in 3 places, which is in practical terms a little bit of a nightmare, but essentially the main focus is in Brussels, but we do have back office in Luxembourg, and we are obliged by the treaty, although the European Parliament itself has voted against it at least 8 times, on at least 8 occasions, we are obliged to move to Strasbourg for the plenary session 12 times a year. So that's one particular feature, but the other feature is that the European Parliament works in 24 languages. It's not to be elected a member of Parliament in Europe doesn't have a language requirement, so members are entitled to speak their own language in the plenary chamber on the floor of the House, and their citizens are also entitled to be able to read the proceedings in their own language. So this, of course, adds a particular layer. It means, of course, that we have special streams of recruitment for not just translators and interpreters, but also for lawyer linguists who are specialists in their national legal system, but also highly qualified linguists as well. So this means that I think almost 50% of the 7,000 people who work in the European Parliament are of linguistic category, and half of the remainder are public servants, and the other half are temporary agents who are recruited by the political groups. And of course, the individual members of Parliament have their own assistants, not as many as congressmen. The congressmen can have up to 18. In the European Parliament, it's usually around 5 or 6. They also have other staff in their districts, but in the offices in Brussels, they would have 3, 4, 5 or 6 assistants. And there, of course, there is no, I don't believe there's, I was going to say there's no nationality requirement, but I think recently their career structure has also been aligned on the European civil service. So it probably is likely that you need to be an EU citizen to be a parliamentary assistant. I fear I've run out of time, Marcus. I wanted to kind of skate over all the exciting things I had done in the Parliament, because I went from drafting legislation on the Energy and Research Industry Committee when I started, to being grabbed for parliamentary diplomacy purposes on the former Soviet Union. Just as the Soviet Union was collapsing, there are exciting new possibilities of helping to bring democracy to Russia and all of the former Soviet Union states. And since I'd acquired Russian during my time as a national diplomat, I was snapped up for that, and then I came back to the legislative stream. I worked in the cabinet of the Secretary General. Perhaps almost my best job was as deputy head of cabinet for President Cox. Working with the president is a 24-hour day, 7 days a week job, but it's a tremendously exciting and stimulating position to be in. And after that, then I think I did the best, most rewarding job of my time in the Parliament was my 7 years as head of Secretariat on the Internal Market Committee. That's the equivalent, I guess, of staff director in a congressional committee. But there, if you work very well with your chairman or your chairwoman, as I did, I think you can great things, and you can achieve great things. I had worked on very exciting legislation. It may not sound exciting, but the regulation of services in the European Union was a tremendously tough piece of legislation to get through. And on the day we were voting it on the floor of the House, we had a demonstration outside of 30,000 people protesting against it. So it's nothing, nothing if not exciting. And finally, I've ended up in the United States to help deepen the ties, the legislative ties, really between the work on legislation. I mean, between the United States and Congress and the European Parliament, and that's tremendously exciting at a time of where regulation needs to be found on big tech. We need to find a way forward on climate change. We need to regulate artificial intelligence, and so on. There are many, many issues, and these are my bread and butter issues on a day-to-day basis, and I couldn't ask for a better job. Thank you. Sorry if I was too long, Marcus.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. And I would hope that now you have a slightly easier job than the last 4 years in terms of, liaising with the Congress. But anyway, there are questions already.
Yeah, the Congress was never a problem. It was only,
the administration.
Congress was never a problem.
That's good.
Okay,
There's already a question. Please keep the questions coming, including one where they can find the European Parliament Liaison Office internships posted. So but maybe we can go later into that. Next, we have Monsieur Consul General Laurent Galissot, the Consul General of France in Miami. Thank you very much for being here as well. Monsieur Consul General took office in September 2019, and if you're down here in Miami, you know that is high peak season for the hurricanes. That was just basically around the time when Hurricane Dorian hit the Miami and Florida areas, as well as the Bahamas. Crisis management thus was his first practical exercise down here in his office. Since then, he's been a great supporter of FIU as well as our Jean Monnet Center. So thank you very much again for being here. He joined the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1996 and held numerous posts abroad as well as in France, including in Jerusalem, Ottawa, Canada, Brussels, Belgium, and Rome, Italy. As a cooperation counselor, special and political advisor, and multilateral negotiator. He also worked with the European Commission. In 2014, he led for 2 years the mission of French language and education within the Foreign Ministry. In 2016, he was one of the first diplomatic advisors working with regional prefects and joined the city of Marseille as an advisor there. He took up the position of the Secretary General for the One Planet Summit, a platform for private and public engagement launched by the French president to implement the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. He was also a researcher in political science at the European University Institute in Florence, Italy, which is basically the top school in the world for EU studies, next to the College College in Bruges. A graduate of Sorbonne in literature and sociology, he also holds a European master's degree in cultural management. So we're very glad to have you here, and thank you very much. The next 10 minutes or so are yours.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, everybody. I will try to be short because I think interaction is very key in this kind of forum. So I would love to answer questions. But as Michael reminded me, and I forgot that because as a national French diplomat, we had several interactions either in Brussels or when Michael was in New York for humanitarian affairs. And it's true, the spectrum of a diplomat is very big. So I don't know, Marcus, if you can just show this slide, because it's very important to disconstruct, stereotypes. That's very interesting because how you see yourself, and nowadays we see ourselves very bored in front of a screen. What people see you more as intelligent, agent, as your mom see you, that you will make a very nice, statement in front of the United Nations. How you can see you, rescuing people under threat of a hurricane, or when COVID struck Miami, for example, we had a lot of nationals on cruise ships, and we had really emergency cases. So you're very into operation, and sometimes you're really on the ground and the first person to a frontliner in a sense. Well, you know, other people can see you, you know, diplomats are well-dressed people and they just like to chat in some private settings. And what your friends see you because you travel, and you mentioned that I really travel in a lot of countries. So they see you more kind of a lucky guy having a kind of indefinite travel pass to other destinations. So that's very interesting because these are all the representation you can have as a diplomat. And none of them is correct, of course, and none of them is sufficient because you do action, but of course, I think Maria framed it very well. We need to have personalities. We need to have people connecting with other people, and that's the baseline of a diplomat job. And then you need to have doers, I mean, projects. And that's a bit the story of my career. When I started on the ground, I really made projects on the ground during the peace process in Jerusalem, and that was very exciting. And when I started this career, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a diplomat. But this first experience, you know, bringing people together, making things happen on the ground was so valuable for me. Was so interesting that I said, okay, I'm going to apply for this career because it's really too interesting. And I started to learn Arabic, other languages, and so on. And then, you know, the world opened to you. As a French diplomat, we have the chance to have one of the biggest networks in the world. So with the US, we're the biggest network. And for example, in the US, you got 10 consulates. So Miami is one of the 10 consulates we have in the country. And it's very interesting for me in my position today to be able to chat with my colleagues in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and to really have analysis on the ground, but to carry on projects to really make things happen on the ground. Partnership with university, education is very interesting and very important. Public service, Maya mentioned consular affairs means public service, passport, and so on. And it's true, we do do this sort of thing. And that's very interesting because you see the people-to-people relationship, how European and Americans are working together, investment, economic project, new development. For example, in Miami, we opened a French Tech. There's a lot of new startups coming on in Miami. That's very interesting. And it really meet, for example, the expectation of the city, which is involving in that direction. So I would say that in a nutshell, that we need personality, we need people interested to do projects and not bored in front of the screen. I love this idea because we are stuck now in that dimension, but not forever, hopefully. And in my career, being able to, for example, organize things was very key. And I was hired, in a sense, by the diplomatic office of the President Macron for organizing One Planet Summit, because they thought that I was the guy able to organize concretely, to deal with partners, to deal with authorities in different countries to make it happen. And so we made it in New York, and with Michael Bloomberg, that was absolutely an extraordinary experience I had. And I organized another summit in Africa, so very differently in Nairobi, with you know, the authorities of Kenya, and with a lot of heads of state and ministers during the National Environmental Assembly that take place in March, indeed, and in Nairobi. So being able, I mean, you need all these skills, and we're very interested as a French network, a French consulate, to have people into action, having a personality, we love people with strong personality. I know that it sounds a little bit you know, a diplomat doesn't say a word higher than another, and so on. It's true. I mean, we soften the tone, but in the reality of the work, we like people really perseverant, sometimes stubborn, ready to make things happen. And it's not an easy job. So it's not a dining room career. It's people with guts, with passion, able to connect with others, to listen to others as well. That's very important, and to make things happen on the ground. And one of an experience, perhaps with Michael, we can talk about it. I was very proud when I was in Brussels, was the joint programming issue. You know, we were programming actions from different countries in the world, but with no unity as European. And I was by this time, when everybody was talking, should the Commission put on the table joint programming of, you know, all the member states and the Commission together. And it was obvious that we had to move forward on this issue. But the way to channel it, to make it happen, to prevent any misunderstanding from other countries, because obviously there's big players, smaller players, different interests, and so on, was, you know, to be aware of how to bring everybody on board was really something, you know, amazing to do, and we succeeded. And now everybody said, "Oh, it's obvious." But by the time we started, and we had this vision, and because, you know, French input in the European Union is really strong into more integration, into making things happen more as a unity. We really succeeded in developing new strategies together for international cooperation. And even if it wasn't very easy with UK, I just have to admit it, that they understood very well the purpose, and by this time they were very much aligned on this. So we had, with explanation and we succeeded to make it happen. And I'm very proud of this because, you know, I do believe that diplomacy needs guts and strong values. That's all. Happy to answer.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Now we're moving on to last, but certainly not least, our last exciting speaker, Ms. Rebecca Kimbrell. Thank you very much for being here. I was quite impressed when I took students to Europe in years past and we visited the, what is it, the US, I may be wrong, US Embassy or US Delegation, right? US Delegation to the European Union. You know, the number of just, you know, bureaucrats and officials working there. So hopefully maybe you can share a little bit more about that. But let me first introduce you appropriately. Ms. Rebecca Kimbrell is not only our diplomat in residence here at Florida International University, and I honestly myself don't know how many diplomats in residence there are, so maybe you can say something about that as well. She's a political cone, again, political cone, right? So that may be also worth the explaining in more detail, officer who most recently served as the US Consul to Lyon, France, from 2016 to 2018. Prior to this, she was Deputy Director in the Office of Caucasus Affairs and Regional Conflicts in the Bureau of European and Eurasian Affairs at the State Department, I suppose. Rebecca is also, or Ms. Kimbrell, also served as Special Assistant to the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs and as a Senior Watch Officer, again, another key term, in the Secretary of State's Operations Center. Ms. Kimbrell's overseas assignments included tours as political officer in Kiev, Ukraine, and as an economic officer in Ankara, Turkey. She began her career in Kingston, Jamaica. Before joining the State Department, she served as Executive Director of the Nashville, Tennessee Sports Authority. She earned an MA in International Relations from Vanderbilt University and a BA in Political Science from David Lipscomb's University. Hailing from the South, born in Birmingham, but settling in Nashville, she's an avid football fan and cook. She is married to a diplomatic security special agent and has studied French, Turkish, and Ukrainian. So with that, welcome. Thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So yes, I'll start with what a diplomat in residence is, and then I'll go through a little bit of my career. The State Department has 16 diplomats in residence throughout the country. This is a tour for us. We serve 2 years, we're attached to a university, and we are the State Department's recruiters for the Foreign Service. So my job now is to recruit talented prospects for jobs not only as Foreign Service Officer Generalists, such as myself, but also for all of our Foreign Service Specialist positions. We are looking for a lot of individuals who have a STEM background, medical background, other things to also work in our embassies and consulates. So that's what I'm doing now. I have been with the State Department for 19 years as of January, which is really hard to believe. We went through all of my previous postings. I will talk a little bit about my cone and the different career tracks. We've changed it from cone to track. I am a political officer by concentration, but I have done jobs in every single one of our career tracks. We have political, economic, consular, management, and public diplomacy. And I've done a little bit of all of those. As Ms. Belovas was talking about, she had to get her consular certification. We all do as well. We have to do 1 year of consular work in our first 2 tours, so our first 4 years or 5 years of our career, because that we consider is the most important thing we do as diplomats. We protect US citizens abroad. So my consular tour was in Kingston, Jamaica. I then I took almost a year of Turkish, 10 months of Turkish, and then went to Ankara, Turkey during a time Erdogan had just been elected, and Turkey was saying that it wanted to move toward the EU. So I worked very closely with my colleagues at the EU delegation and the other European missions in Ankara on customs reform. And sometimes I think that that was 3 years of my life I'll never get back, but it really helped me. It brought me closer to Europe. And as you know, as you've seen, I've spent most of my career in Europe. After Turkey, I took 10 months of Ukrainian and went to Ukraine for 2 years as a political officer. This was pre-Maidan, just prior to the Maidan. It was during the time when Yanukovych and Tymoshenko were running against each other for the presidency, and I left just as Yanukovych was putting Tymoshenko in jail. So that was also an interesting 2 years. Came to Washington and worked for our Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Phil Gordon, who has done a lot of work in France and with the European Union as well. And then went on as a crisis manager, if you will, and the Secretary's Operations Center. So the 24-hour Operations Center, we get all of the calls when there are crises around the world. I was in there when Benghazi happened. We were on the floor dealing with that crisis as well as others. So we're the central line, and oftentimes the State Department is the first call that's received in the United States from our embassies and consulates or American citizens overseas. And it's our job then to call all the different federal agencies that deal with crises together to start dealing with the issue. And then after that, I thought I would take a break. So I went and worked on Caucasus affairs, because there's absolutely nothing difficult about Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And so that was also 2 very interesting years. And then finally, Lyon. Lyon was remarkable, beautiful, amazing. I miss it. I miss the food, and it was a wonderful opportunity. I finished out my time in Lyon as one of the US representatives to the Women's World Cup final in Lyon, which was pretty awesome. And then I came here. And I'm getting ready in the fall to go to Islamabad, Pakistan. So just to give you an idea of kind of US diplomats, some of them do specialize in regions. Some people like to live all over the world and just do things no matter what. Others, I would say myself included, kind of stick to a region because that's what we know and we build our knowledge there. But, I mentioned those career tracks, we're all doing different things in the embassy. So when you apply to be a Foreign Service officer, the process I think is very similar to what Ms. Belovas was explaining as well. The first step is that you have to take the Foreign Service exam, which we offer 3 times a year. That is very similar. I call it the GRE of international relations. You're going to be tested on history, politics, economics, geography, pop culture, international relations, all those types of things. The other part that is so very, very important for all steps of our examination is your ability to write. We ask for applicants to submit 6 personal narratives that explain how they demonstrate what we call the 13 dimensions. Now, the requirements to be a Foreign Service officer are very different, I think, from my colleagues around the world. You don't actually have to have a college degree to become a US Foreign Service officer generalist. So what you generally think of as a US diplomat. You just have to be between the ages of 21 and 59 years of age. That being said, I don't know anyone who's ever, succeeded throughout the entire process without some sort of degree. Master's degrees are not required. We are testing the 13 dimensions. As I like to say, it's not who you know or where you've been, it's who you are. And so we're looking for these characteristics of adaptability and leadership and communication. All of those can be found on our careers website at careers.state.gov, and I will put that into the chat room in just a bit. So you take the Foreign Service exam. If you pass Foreign Service exam, they read your narratives, and then you go through a panel who decides whether you'll go on to the next step, and then you do an oral assessment, which is not, it's a terrible day, I won't lie. They keep you for a day, they put you through a series of different exercises and hypotheticals and different things that they try to recreate a setting that you would be exposed to as a diplomat overseas. If you pass the oral assessment, yay, it's a great day. They come in, they tell you at the end of the day. Then you have to go through your medical and security clearances. You have to be able to have a top secret security clearance and be posted anywhere in the world medically. And then at the end of that, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, you have to choose one of our 5 career tracks. And if you pass all of the steps, then you're put on a register based on the career track you chose. So it can be consular, political, and then as they're hiring new classes of officers, they pull from the tops of each of the lists. So depending on the score that you get throughout your examination process, that's where you'll be on the list. So that is for being a Foreign Service officer. For specialists, the process is very similar. The only difference is that they're testing specialized knowledge. So for example, we have jobs for engineers. They're going to be testing those engineers about their expertise in engineering, but the rest of the process is pretty much the same. Internships, fellowships, things of that nature. We do have a number of different internship and fellowship programs. With the State Department, there is the unpaid internship program, which is probably the largest. These run every semester, so spring, fall, and summer. One thing that I have to caution you is that the application opens about 9 months ahead of time for our internship. So I have gotten a lot of emails from students last semester, or even this semester, asking about summer internships this year. And our application closed last fall for this summer because interns have to get a security clearance as well, and that takes a little bit of time. I'll mention that all of our internships do require US citizenship. You can be a dual national, but you must be a US citizen. We also have, for a small number of students who demonstrate financial need, the US Foreign Service Internship Program. Again, the requirements for this are very strict. You have to have a demonstrated need. You have to file a FAFSA, just like you would for financial aid for college. But that gives you 2 summer internships and a mentorship throughout the year. So either before and after your junior year or before and after your senior year. And then finally, we do have fellowships. We have the Pickering Fellowship and the Rangel Fellowship. Those are both for graduate students. It pays for a 2-year graduate degree in a subject that is relevant to being a Foreign Service Officer Generalist. So individuals, we pay for graduate school, give individuals internships, both in the department or in Congress, depending on which one it is, and then overseas in a mission. But then with the expectation that those individuals will be able to make it, to pass the Foreign Service exam. Hopefully we've given you enough mentorship that you'll be able to at that point, and give us a 5-year, give us a 5-year commitment as a Foreign Service Officer. The final fellowship is called the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. This is for students who are interested in IT careers. It pays for the last 2 years of an undergraduate degree in an IT-related field, or 2 years of a master's degree in an IT-related field, with the understanding that a person would be an information management specialist for us for 5 years. All of this information, exhaustive information, again, I'll type in our website. They have sometimes different age requirements or years in school. I forgot the one final thing, which is very popular right now, is our virtual student federal service internship. This is an internship where students stay in school and they work virtually on a project that they've selected. This includes not only the State Department, but quite a number of federal agencies, and runs from the beginning of the fall semester through the end of the spring semester. The application process for that is July 1st through July 31st for the following school year, and a clearance isn't required, so the process goes much quicker. Getting very quick to skills, because I know that I am also talking quite a bit, but talk for a moment about the type of skills we're looking for. I mentioned the 13 dimensions. These would be characteristics that you would come to mind when you're thinking of a diplomat. Your ability to negotiate, your flexibility is huge, as Ms. Belovas said as well. No day is the same. I often get the question, what's a day like in your life? And they're always different. Even when you're doing the same job, there could be a day where you're with the ambassador, taking notes at a high-level meeting, that you're the control officer for a VIP delegation who's come to the country, or you're meeting with your interlocutors on a topic and writing a cable back. If you're a public diplomacy officer, you're working on exchanges with students, with host country nationals, etc. So the 13 dimensions, you need to have just that whole package in order to be successful, but writing is really important. One of the things that I've seen, I think, that holds individuals back when they're taking the Foreign Service Officer test is that their writing isn't exactly where it needs to be. So I encourage students to work with their professors, work with the Career Services Office at FIU. They're phenomenal and have been doing this for a really long time to help you with your applications and with your structured interviews and all of that. So quickly about jobs for Americans in Europe that don't include one of the US missions or being a Foreign Service Officer. We do have the US Agency for International Development for individuals who are interested in public policy, health, things of that nature. They should take a look at usaid.gov. That is our development side of the house, and you must have a master's degree to work for them. The Foreign Commercial Service, the Department of Commerce also has Foreign Service officers, as well as the Department of Agriculture. If you're an American living overseas, you might be able to find a job at one of the US embassies or consulates as a locally employed staff member. But you could also, as long as you have the permission to work, as long as you're a resident in that country, or you have permission to work in one of the European countries, you might also be able to find a job in the local economy. You can work for NGOs, for international organizations. There are a lot of different opportunities. I often tell students when they're looking for opportunities to have more experience, to cast a wide net, to really look, to think about working for an international organization or for a consultancy group. You know, your language skills, your education, those are skills that individuals are looking for. So you don't necessarily have to be an American diplomat in order to find a job overseas. And I think I've gone through all the questions. I do want to explain what the National Sports Authority is, kind of thinking about my road to diplomacy. I started college as a chemistry major, thought I wanted to be a climate scientist. I took organic chemistry and decided perhaps that was not the best choice for me. Moved to political science, which I've always enjoyed, and decided that I wanted to be a political science professor. After a couple of years of graduate school, decided that I really wanted to be a US diplomat, but they had stopped hiring for a couple of years. This was in the mid-90s. That's how old I am. So I went to work for the city of Nashville as the landlord for the Tennessee Titans and the Nashville Predators. So I worked with the NFL and the NHL, which is always a really interesting step before becoming a diplomat. But I think you have to be diplomatic in any job that you get with a government agency. So thank you, that's all.
Thank you so much. I think we had already a great overview of the various career paths, career tracks, and objectives. And I'm personally also quite interested or fascinated to see that, you know, aside from the technical skills, you do need a lot of what you call, you know, specific characteristics, flexibility, perseverance, and so on and so on. But we have a whole bunch of questions, about 24. So I will choose the ones in the order that they appeared. Maybe sometimes, you know, conflate them in the interest of time, or choose the ones that are most relevant to our topic here, right? Which is to give perspectives on careers with or in Europe. So Corey Hancock writes a number of them, so I'm gonna choose the first one first to address to any one of you. How would you rank a posting in the United States compared to other places in the world, right? Is the US particularly competitive and sought after, or do European diplomats prefer postings elsewhere? And then one specifically that he asked for Consul General Galisso. What sort of scholarships are available to US citizens who pursue studies, I guess graduate studies at French universities? Thank you. So for the first one about the preferability of US postings, I don't know whoever wants to take that one.
Maybe I can come in here because I've only had 2 postings that both have been in the United States. So there's obviously the US does exercise a pull and attraction, but it's, you know, there are plenty of interesting places in the world to go to. And my advice is that, you know, if you get the opportunity to go and live and work in another country, you should take it, because, you know, you're always going to discover something new. I think it will enrich you as an individual as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Marcus, just to add on what Michael said, for the French network, I mean, the US, like China or big country, is a network of consulate, as I explained. So that's very interesting because it means working in a continent, more or less, at the level of a really big space, and that creates a lot of synergy. And I do think that adds a lot of value to our work. And I take the opportunity to answer about grants. Of course, there's grants, and at the moment, obviously, you know, it's students have to work remotely, but there's a lot of program, and there's even grants for courses taught in France in English. And there's obviously other way to bring students, and with FIU we have a good cooperation. So we are in internship. So if people are interested, and as I mentioned, we're looking not at the CV and the bio that much, but on what the person has achieved or wants to achieve, and being in a project, being already in contact with NGOs, with other organizations. You know, as myself, as I was posted in the commission by a time where no diplomats wanted to go really in Brussels, inside the DG Relax, and Michael Curtis can testimony these times are gone. But it was a little bit, you know, not novel. I mean, if you're a French diplomat, you're not going to work with the EU. What does it mean? And now it's the other way around. I mean, it's really strong value, a strong asset in your career to have been able to work in a different cultural environment. You know, administratively, culturally, the Commission is very different from our national ministry. So that's very interesting. And I was, for example, one of the few as well French diplomat being able to work with inside the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that's very different as well. So you always learn to be inserted in a different cultural setting. United Nations are different, Council of Europe is different, and so on. So you need to get your experience through being outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's make your career more exciting and your experience more valuable.
Thank you. I think at the end you broke off a little bit, but thank you. I think we got the gist of it. If there's nobody else who wants to join in on the US posting, I would move to the next question. That is by Julia Zverskova. She's a history major at FIU, focusing on European history, but also a Russian interpreter. And she's interested, of course, in diplomatic sector. She's open to travel, relocate. Can you point her, so almost the opposite, right, to the US, can you point her to maybe more specific, you know, Caucasus or Russian opportunities, oriented opportunities? I don't know if Julia is a US citizen or not, or European or Russian. Anyone wants to take? Can you hear me? Yes, please, Joseph.
Just a quick word, since I worked a lot in the former Soviet Union, or the successor states to the former Union. The European Parliament does use Russian interpreters because meetings with Russian counterparts happen on a fairly regular basis, or Russian speaking. However, these are usually freelancers. So unlike the other institutions, the Parliament has a large interpretation service, but this is essentially for the Europe, for the 24 languages of the European Union. But there is certainly scope for freelance work, a lot of scope for freelance work. The Russian interpreters I know who have been most successful are the ones working for the United Nations, but that's obviously outside the scope of this meeting.
Yeah, but it's still diplomacy, right? It's one way or another. So thank you. That's actually expands sort of the scope of possibilities, right? That next to the European Parliament, you can also work in the UN. Thank you. I'm gonna merge two questions. They kind of somewhat are related by Joyce Garcia and Francisco Soliman Sanchez, because Joyce asked, are internships mandatory or must have when seeking to start a career in the diplomatic sector, right? Is a determinant factor. And then Francisco said very concretely, he was offered a position in the Dominican Republic embassy in South Africa to work as a secretary. And he wonders if that's the right decision for his career and if you have any advice. So internships versus sort of secretarial entry-level positions.
If I may. So on the internship, obviously, when you start your career, it's good to have something as a basis when you start your first job. If you're lucky enough to start your first job straight out of university without any experience, well, good for you. Sometimes it's just good to have some kind of office experience before an actual employment, and traineeships, internships are usually the starting point for a lot of people, and for your future employer, it just shows them that you've done something like that, whether you were paid for it or you weren't, but at least you have some kind of working in a team, working for an organization experience after your studies. So I would say, I don't think it's for, well, I can't speak to every foreign service, but it's not a requirement per se, but obviously it's something that adds to your resume, adds to your CV, because if you only have academic experience, it might not be enough to be selected to the next round from 200 candidates, for instance. And on the other question, whether this person should take a job that was offered, it obviously getting offered a job from straight from university, as I understand, I think this is a student, right? To work for another country in a third country, it's very exciting. And as others have mentioned here, and I think Michael was the last, of course, it's good to be abroad and just live abroad for a while and do something different. But yes, but in the end, if this is a move that makes sense for you, and this is that you feel that it's a good opportunity for you, why not, right? But of course, if that doesn't go together, whatever you had in plans for yourself, or if that interrupts your studies or something else, there are always factors to consider. But for me, it seems like an exciting opportunity.
Great, thank you. Any other person who wants to add to that? Yes, Ms. Kimbrell.
Just very quickly, when I'm counseling students, I tell them that no job is too small, that I find a lot of students they're holding out for that one perfect job, the thing that's going to really, use all of their education, all of their skills and catapult them, if you will, into diplomacy. The average age for an incoming US diplomat right now is around 30, 32 years of age. So we are looking at people who have some experience. I mentioned my kind of circuitous route to diplomacy, but also during that time when I was in undergrad, when I was in graduate school, I was working as a secretary for a state senator in Tennessee. I was doing a number of other jobs just to pay the bills. And I passed the Foreign Service exam on the first try, which only 1 in 10 people actually do. I think in part because I was able to develop a lot of the judgment and the life skills that just having the educational background would not have provided. So I tell people, it doesn't have to be an internship with the State Department, just find something that helps you build those skills. And if the job in the embassy in South Africa is something that is financially, reasonable for you to do, I think it's a great opportunity.
Couldn't agree more with Rebecca and Maria on that.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm also going to take the next 2 questions together because, again, they're somewhat related. One is from Juliana. Hi, Juliana. Good to hear from you. She has a degree in international relations from FIU and sustainability, and she's interested in the environmental sector, particularly sort of in transatlantic environmental relations. I was wondering, what would you recommend to her in terms of, making a career out of it? And the same, but a different direction applies to Adnan. Adnan Nasser is also completing his IR degree in July 2021. He's interested in American foreign policy, particularly as it relates to the Middle East. So what's your advice for an individual trying to build that kind of opportunity? So one more focused on sustainability and environment, and one IR graduate focused on US foreign policy towards the Middle East. If you please have any sort of hints or tips.
I can speak to it from the American system. For individuals who are interested in sustainability and the environment, I think USAID is something they should definitely look into, because USAID's mission is to support and help more developing countries build their infrastructure, their sustainability, their rule of law. A master's degree is required, but I think for someone who wants to be hands-on in that respect, then USAID might be a good opportunity. They could also look at just a number of other perhaps NGOs in the United States that deal with that. For someone who is interested in our policy with the Middle East, becoming a foreign service officer, you're not guaranteed that you're going to work in the place that you want to work all the time, but it does give you the opportunity over a career to work on a number of different aspects dealing with our foreign policy to a certain region.
Fantastic, thank you.
And if I may add from the EU side, and on someone interested in environmental issues could come and apply for a traineeship in our Global Affairs and Innovation section, which also covers environment, climate, sustainability, all of that. So starting from a traineeship, it's something, well, first of all, it will give you a great overview of all the topics in the area that the EU deals with, but also it's something very relevant for your future resume.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Curtis. I just wanted to acknowledge him because he had to leave, but he just left our panel. He had to attend to another meeting, so I'm very happy. Was there another input?
No,
Monsieur?
Marcus, I just wanted to add on this, if that working with NGOs, in think tanks, in a coalition of actors is very important. I mean, don't look at the foreign ministry as the alpha and omega of what you want to achieve, because most of the time we hire people who have worked in different settings, as Rebecca said. So, I mean, really make yourself known as a project manager, as somebody who has really strong conviction and who made the case of advancing on the issue you care the most. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at people able to have a coalition of actors, to engage with others, to obviously leverage some funds as well, that could help. Somebody able to make it happen, and to make it happen with others. So I would say that diplomacy is not a monocultural ability. It's the ability of making others working together. And that's very important that you show that.
Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Consul. I have another question for you, two actually, but they're merged into one. One by Ali Jackman, one by Doris Bett, and they basically want to know from you, Monsieur Consul, what tips would you give from somebody to start in the French diplomatic sector? I guess holding US citizenship, so not being a French citizen, where to start? And Ali is particularly looking at within the presidential administration advisor, but I think that probably comes much later in the process, so probably more entry level.
But no, very good question. I mean, where to start with action and proof of your ability to achieve some project, whatever size it is. Because if I take back the example of the One Planet Summit, it's a summit, it's a new way of really, I would define it a new diplomatic way of bringing people through their commitment and through different coalitions. So really, that's very important that, again, even if it's small a project, you really present it to us or to other diplomatic missions, and we're very interested to find a way to collaborate with all your ideas and your project. That's the first step. And then gratefully, a lot of people here, and we have some interns from FIU, and thank you again for directing your students to us. We really develop ideas and projects. So it's really an open-ended process. Just start, bring your ideas, make yourself known, and be a team leader, and we love this kind of profile.
Wonderful, thank you. Let me continue because the questions keep on coming in. We have 15 more minutes. These are the two that are directed at Mr. Dunn. With the European Parliament Liaison Office internships, do you have to be sophomore or junior, or can you apply as a freshman? From what I understand, you cannot apply as a freshman. And the second question was, is there a book that you recommend to learn more about, I guess, European and particularly European parliamentary relations, or European diplomatic relations more generally?
For the internships at the Parliament, all of the details are on our website. It's I think you can find it easily on Google. It's europarl.europa.eu, United States EN for English internships. You have to have at least a primary degree, and we get so many applications. We tend also to take students who are about to get their MA or not. But the requirement is to have already sat your degree, your first degree. What was the second question, Marcus? Sorry.
About a book recommendation that would give you sort of insights in the behind.
That would get me into trouble if I select any particular book on the Parliament. Now there are many. I think there are many sources. What I actually could advise is because you mentioned in the intro that I had worked as a director in the European Parliament Research Service. The European Parliament Research Service, I think, provides very, very useful briefings ranging from facts and figures on the Parliament, very basic information in a very concise way, and it provides analysis on everything EU. And I believe it's used more and more by academic colleagues who are teaching EU. So it's available as an app, I think, that you can download on Apple Store or also on Android. And with this app, you can view all the publications of the European Parliament Research Service. Otherwise, it's on the European Parliament website. Not the most user-friendly in the world, but I think under Think Tank, you have a great resource for the Parliament. I think looking at things in European elections, the classic book on the European Parliament is by Shackleton and Jacobs, but I personally find that more useful as a reference. I know I worked in George Mason University with Professor Desmond Dinan, and he's a great expert and has written recently. He is an expert on the European Council primarily, but he's worked with us a lot in the European Parliament Research Service and has recently written much more about the European Parliament and quite brilliantly. But I mean, there are many. You have Amy Kreppel there in Florida. You have many people who've written very knowledgeably and extensively in the European Parliament. It used to be actually that there was less academic material on the Parliament than on the other institutions, but increasingly this gap is being filled very much, and there's a lot more historical and archival research being done on the European Parliament than was the case too recently. So I wouldn't dare to recommend any single book, but I definitely think that the EPRS can be a useful resource.
Great, thank you. The next couple of questions are actually for Ms. Kimbrell, but the first one may be for all of you, but I have a couple of follow-up questions for Ms. Kimbrell relating to Foreign Service Officer exams. So first is age and limitation. I think for the State Department you said 59 years was the limitation, although the medium age was around the 30s. Then, but others can join in maybe for their respective offices. And then Ms. Kimbrell, Joshua Sepp asks, well, if you're not from a elite university, Ivy League, right? What are your chances? Or maybe I would want to rephrase the question and ask, like, what do you have to do in order to make up for not being from an elite university, right? You probably have to work extra hard. What tips do you have to get prepared for the Foreign Service Officers exam? And Doris Bett asks also if the test can be arranged to give accommodations for people with different abilities. Now, I'm not quite sure what that means, but maybe you have a better idea. Thank you.
If you want me to go with those questions, or if the others want to talk about the age limits, then I can go into the questions afterwards. That's fine. But yes, for everything except for diplomatic security agents, the age range is 20. You have to be 21 when you start, so you can actually start the process at 20, and you must be 59 when you start. So you can't be older than 59 because there is a mandatory retirement of 65. For diplomatic security agents, for the most part, they're federal law enforcement agents. So it is 35 or 36, unless you're a veteran, in which case you might be able to get a waiver of the maximum age to be a diplomatic security agent.
Great, thank you. Can I ask follow-on questions? Because there are a couple of other ones that I've seen there. Can interested students make meetings with you, with diplomat in residence one-on-one? And does the State Department pay for housing and other fees if they decide to take you to another country? I would hope so, that there would be an allowance for that. Right, so on both, that's a yes, I suppose. Fantastic, thank you. Let me get back to the age limit. Anyone else wants to get from their respective spheres? Talk about, is there an age limit upwards or downwards in the European institutions or in the European consulates?
I mean, for the traineeship, we have you have to be 18 years old to apply, but otherwise we don't have any upper limits for anything else.
Fantastic, thank you. And then let me move on to the next question, and that is addressed to whoever wants to take it. I'm merging here two questions, one by Danny Taro and one by Dominic Addison. And they're saying, you know, for US citizens, again, that's always the question, right? That don't have European citizenship of one kind. What are early career prospects? And for Dominic, I would also want to add there, is there anything they can do right now while they're studying that prepares them better for an entry-level career in Washington, European focused, or in Europe? I mean, I guess take courses in international law, international relations, languages you mentioned.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, again, I mean, if you put your ideas, put your personality in a resume and give some direction for us where you want to go, and you want to bridge a relationship between one community and another. You got ideas in the cultural or education field. You want to, you know, we're more and more like a startup. I mean, it sounds strange for a diplomat to say that, but we're really looking at people being able to develop projects. So if you got ideas, contacts, where do you think that in terms of people-to-people relationship, or in terms of a new strategy for the French, for example, for educating or Francophone countries and so on, put it on the paper, make it happen, bring people together. If you're interested in the Caribbean, for example, in Miami, we're very into it. So you want to create events in this field, in this cultural field. We're really open. So I would say don't narrow down too much. Make it open and make it, because sometimes people think, okay, I want to do this and no other things. No. When you're a diplomat, you do a lot of different things, and you do consular. So make it sound open and bring people in your vision. And we love this kind of personality that people, you know, for example, we did a very nice beach cleaning with our Canadian colleague for the environment. Makes this sort of event known and bring other consulates with you. I mean, that's kind of that show your dynamism and the things you care about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have only about 3 to 5 minutes left. So let me go to the next question. Yusra Benkiran at FIU, she is a Model UN delegate, and she asks, similarly, you know, what advice can you give? I think there are a couple of questions for somebody with little to no experience with regards to internships. So if you cannot get an internship for whatever reason, right? How can you, what is plan B in case you apply and you don't get the internship, these highly competitive internships? And then Joseph Shear is at FIU's Latin American Caribbean Studies program and is interested in Latin America and was wondering if you have any specific opportunities for Joseph in Latin America. So the first one about, you know, not being chosen, not being able to do an internship, what alternatives are there to get an entry? And the second one is a specific interest in Latin America, if you have any recommendations.
I can say a few words on the internship. I mean, first thing is, I would say, try harder and try again. If you don't get the internship first time. And, you know, we do understand that the students have, their resume is not that long if you're applying for your first internship, for instance. And we understand that, but I have to say, at least in the EU delegation, we don't look at, you know, Ivy League colleges and others. It doesn't matter. What really matters on paper first is what you put down in your cover letter, how you explain yourself. What is your motivation of applying to this internship? And it doesn't need 3 pages of everything you've Googled about the European Union, but it's really about opening up yourself. What is your passion about this post? You know, and if you're clear in how you're writing and explaining yourself and opening up, and if you can do it in one page, we really appreciate that. And this is something that can really set you apart, to show who you are in that one page. And on the second question on Latin America, again, we here, we have dedicated officers who deal with EU Latin America relations. So if you're interested, again, apply for a traineeship in the EU delegation in our political section, and you can deal with Latin American issues as well.
Thank you, fantastic. Anyone else who wants to concludingly chime in? No, I think, well, yeah, please go ahead.
I'll just go very quickly on the internships. I think going back to what I said before, just find experience, find ways to volunteer perhaps. If you're not able to find an internship, but you can do something that has an international component to it, you know, volunteering to work with refugees, using language skills, travel, you know, just find ways to travel if you can. There are scholarships available, which I forgot to mention, for students to learn critical languages. Again, all that information is at careers.state.gov, but there are a number of different ways that you can get experience without that like prime and that really competitive internship. You just have to, you know, open your mind up to a lot of different possibilities.
Fantastic. That was a wonderful concluding word. Thank you very much. And I think you all posted already your websites on the chat for everyone. I also want to, we couldn't get through quite all of them, but I think if they're going to the websites, they're able to contact you personally, or at least your offices, right, to get further information on their specific cases. So if you have specific career development issue, then please get in touch with our wonderful panelists. I want to thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. Christine and I, you did a fantastic job, and I'm sure that all the students, you could see by the interest, were also quite excited to have you on there. So thank you very much for spending your time, you're not sharing your knowledge with us. I want to let everybody know that once you log off shortly, you will be prompted to fill out a survey. And once again, since this is a grant-funded opportunity, the European Union wants to get the feedback on how you thought this panel was. So please do us the favor and maybe increase your chances for a future career there by filling out the survey anyway. And if you really need more information, I also want to let you know that yes, the panel will be edited and recorded, and will be posted on our website, which is Miami EUC, that stands for EU Center, miamieuc.fiu.edu. There's also from the Meet EU grant, there's the meeteu.unc, that stands for University of North Carolina, meeteu.unc.edu website with more information on the Getting to Know Europe grant. Our next panel on Career Services panel will be, I think, on April 8th. Check our website, miamieuc.fiu.edu. On April 8th, we should have a panel on private sector opportunities with representatives of European companies. So that being said, once again, thank you all for attending. Lots of thanks to our panelists. You did a wonderful job, and I hope to see and talk to all of you soon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.